He actually made everything from silverware to necklaces to rings. And just about anything he touched is considered a masterpiece.
What you have here is pre-revolution Russian imperial jewelry. That's onyx underneath there. This white metal right here, that is all platinum.
A necklace walks into the gold and silver pawn shop, ancient, ornate, dripping with lapis lazuli and hammered gold that hasn't seen daylight in 2,000 years. Rick Harrison has handled rare artifacts before. He's seen coins from Caesar's era, weapons from the Crusades. But the moment this piece hits the counter, something stops him cold. The seller claims it belonged to Cleopatra herself. Rick almost laughs. Then the expert arrives, and nobody is laughing anymore. $1 million changes everything. Las Vegas on a slow Tuesday has a particular kind of quiet to it. The gold and silver pawn shop isn't packed. The cameras are rolling, but nothing's happening. Rick Harrison is behind the counter doing what Rick Harrison does between the big moments, waiting. Then the door opens. The man who walks in is in his 60s, well-dressed, calm in the specific way that people are calm when they're carrying something they know is extraordinary. Under his arm is a case, hard-sided, velvet-lined, the kind of case you'd use to transport a surgical instrument or a museum loan. He sets it on the counter without a word and unlatches it slowly. Rick leans forward. Inside, resting against deep burgundy velvet, is a collar necklace. Not a pendant, not a chain. A full ceremonial collar, wide, flat, constructed from interlocking gold panels so precisely fitted they move like chainmail when the case shifts. Between each panel, deep blue lapis lazuli beads catch the shop light and hold it. The color is almost violent. Not the pale imitation lapis you see in tourist markets. This is the real thing, saturated, ancient, the kind of blue that makes you understand why the Egyptians considered it more valuable than gold. Rick doesn't touch it yet. He just looks. The seller introduces himself as a retired antiquities dealer. Alexandria, Egypt, that's where he's from, where he built his career, where he acquired this piece through a private estate sale more than 30 years ago. His asking price, he says without flinching, is $800,000. Rick keeps his face neutral. He's good at that. But his eyes are running the math fast. He's handled Egyptian pieces before. A canopic jar, one of the ceremonial containers used in ancient burial rites, sold through Christie's in 2019 for $180,000. That was considered remarkable. What's sitting in this velvet case makes that canopic jar look like a souvenir. Then the seller says the word, Cleopatra. Rick sets the necklace down, very carefully, very deliberately, and picks up his phone. Rick Harrison does not reach for a loop. He reaches for gloves. That's the first sign that something has shifted in the room. Rick uses a loop for coins, for gemstones, for the everyday remarkable. Gloves mean he's treating this like something that could be damaged by the oils on human skin. Gloves mean he's already decided this deserves that level of respect. He lifts the necklace out of the case with both hands and holds it under the light. Up close, the craftsmanship is almost unsettling. The gold panels aren't smooth, they're worked. Hand-hammered, not cast. You can see the micro variations in the surface, the infinitesimal irregularities that only come from a human hand striking metal thousands of times with deliberate, trained precision. That technique is consistent with Ptolemaic Egyptian metalworking from the 1st century BC, a period when Egyptian craftsmen were producing gold work so refined that modern jewelers still study it. Machine casting didn't exist. Every millimeter of this piece was made by someone who learned their craft the way people learned everything back then. Slowly, by hand, over a lifetime. Then there's the lapis. Rick holds the collar closer and the blue practically pulses. Lapis lazuli, that color, that depth, comes from one place and one place only, the Badakhshan mines in northeastern Afghanistan. In the ancient world, those mines were the single source of lapis for every civilization that used it. Egyptian pharaohs imported it. The Romans paid fortunes for it. It traveled thousands of miles by caravan before it ever reached a craftsman's bench. The lapis in this necklace isn't decorative filler. It's a statement of power. Rick turns the piece over slowly. Along the inner edge of the central gold panel, almost hidden unless you're looking for it, sits a row of engraved symbols. Cartouche-style markings, the kind of notation used in royal Egyptian court contexts. Not painted on, not stamped. Carefully, deliberately engraved into the gold by someone who knew exactly what they were writing and exactly who it was for. Rick sets the necklace down. If you found something like this buried in a family estate, an ancient piece with a royal name attached to it, would you even know what you were holding? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. He knows enough about Egyptian antiquities to know that he has reached the absolute edge of his knowledge, and that edge is telling him something loud and clear. A Ptolemaic gold collar sold through Sotheby's in 2011. A piece with solid authentication but zero royal provenance fetched $320,000. What's sitting on his counter right now has markings that piece didn't have, a story that piece didn't have, a name attached to it that changes the calculation entirely. Whatever this is, it's old. Whatever this is, it's real. The only question left is the one that could make this the most important transaction in the history of the gold and silver pawn shop. Whose name is on it? Rick has a short list of people he calls when something walks into the shop that he can't explain. Dr. Lisa Hochberg is on that list. Ancient jewelry specialist. 2 decades of field work across Egypt, Greece, and the Mediterranean. The kind of expert who has held things in museum vaults that the public will never get to see. Rick doesn't explain much on the phone. He just says you need to come in. Today. She arrives within the hour. She doesn't say hello to the necklace. She doesn't gasp or lean in with wide eyes the way a first-timer might. She sets her bag down, pulls out her equipment, camera, measuring tools, UV light, and gets to work. For the first 4 minutes, she doesn't say a single word. The shop is quieter than it has any right to be. Rick stands back and watches her work. The seller sits in his chair near the counter. Still, patient, like a man who has waited 30 years for this moment and can wait a little longer. Dr. Hochberg photographs every panel, every bead, every angle. Then she holds the UV light over the cartouche engravings on the inner edge of the central panel, and she goes still. Not the stillness of confusion. The stillness of someone who has just seen something confirm what they were quietly hoping for. When she finally speaks, she does it the way surgeons deliver serious news. Carefully, with no unnecessary words. The engravings, she says, are consistent with Royal Ptolemaic court notation. Not the kind of markings found on ceremonial replica pieces, made for tombs or offerings. Not burial goods. Personal adornment. The real thing. The kind of piece that would have been clasped around a living person's neck in a royal court 2,000 years ago. Then the carbon residue results come back. The organic adhesive binding 2 of the lapis beads to their gold settings, a microscopic sample, analyzed on-site with a portable dating kit, returns a preliminary date range. 80 BC to 30 BC. Rick does the math before Dr. Hochberg says it out loud. Cleopatra 7 ruled Egypt from 51 BC to 30 BC. That window sits almost perfectly inside the date range of this piece. Not close, not adjacent. Inside it, nobody moves. Moments like this one, where a quiet Vegas pawn shop turns into something out of an archaeology thriller, are exactly what this channel is built for. Hit subscribe so you're here when the next one drops. The seller hasn't shifted in his chair. Rick is standing with his arms crossed, jaw set, eyes on Dr. Hochberg. She removes her glasses, looks at him directly, and says 7 words. 7 words that will bounce off these walls for days after the cameras stop rolling. The number she's about to put on this piece isn't just going to surprise Rick Harrison. It's going to rewrite everything he thought was possible inside this shop. Dr. Hochberg doesn't build to it. She doesn't soften it. She looks at Rick, looks at her notes, and says the number flat and clean. $1 million. Conservative estimate. Pending full laboratory authentication. The room doesn't explode. That's the thing nobody expects watching it back. There's no whoop. No fist pump. No grin spreading across Rick Harrison's face the way it does when he flips a guitar for 3 times what he paid. Rick puts both hands flat on the counter, palms down, fingers spread, and he breathes. Just breathes. The gold and silver pawn shop, a place that has seen knives and coins and cars and cannons walk through its door, goes quieter than it has ever been on camera. $1 million for something that fits in a velvet case. For about 30 seconds, that number is the only thing in the room. Then Dr. Hochberg keeps talking, and the number stops being the biggest moment in the room. She explains it carefully, the way you explain something to someone who needs to understand it completely and immediately. Under the 1970 UNESCO Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import, Export, and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property, the international agreement that reshaped how the world handles ancient artifacts. Any object originating from Egypt and removed from the country after 1970 requires fully documented legal export clearance, provenance paperwork, chain of custody records, official acquisition documentation that traces the piece from its origin to its current owner without gaps. She looks at the seller's paperwork. There are gaps. The private estate documents are there. The acquisition records from the Alexandria sale are partially there, but partially isn't completely. And with a piece of this age, this origin, and this claimed identity, partially is a problem. Rick steps back from the counter. Not dramatically, not in a movie way, just back. One step. The step of a man who has just watched the situation in front of him transform into something that requires a completely different set of decisions. He makes 2 phone calls. The first is to his lawyer. The second is to a cultural property specialist, someone connected to federal authorities who handles exactly this kind of situation, where ancient artifacts and incomplete paperwork and million-dollar appraisals land in the same room at the same time. The shop closes for the rest of the day. $1 million on the table, a federal phone call in the air, and a seller who won't move from his chair. If that number was sitting in front of you and the legal risk was real, would you have taken the deal or walked? Tell us below. The cameras keep rolling. Nobody tells them to stop. The seller doesn't move. He sits in the same chair he's been in since Dr. Hochberg arrived, pale and composed, repeating quietly that the piece was acquired legally, long before 1970, long before the UNESCO Convention changed the rules. His voice doesn't waver. His hands don't shake. Either he's telling the truth, or he's the calmest man Rick Harrison has ever encountered in 30 years of running this shop. For one long, electric afternoon, the kind of afternoon that makes the air in a room feel different, a necklace that may have rested against Cleopatra's throat turns the gold and silver pawn shop into something that looks a great deal like a federal holding area. Nobody buys anything. Nobody sells anything. The necklace sits in its velvet case and waits. The investigation took weeks. Not days, weeks. Federal cultural property cases don't move fast, and this one had enough complexity: an Alexandria estate sale, a decades-old European collection, a UNESCO cutoff date, and $1 million appraisal sitting in the middle of all of it, to keep lawyers and specialists busy for a long time. Rick spoke about it afterward, in interviews, in passing comments, in the careful way he has of addressing things that made him uncomfortable without fully admitting they made him uncomfortable. The discomfort wasn't guilt. He hadn't done anything wrong. The discomfort was the realization, the very clear, very sobering realization, of how thin the line is between holding the most extraordinary thing ever to cross your counter and watching federal agents walk it out the door. But the line held. The seller's provenance checked out. The necklace had been part of a private European collection since the 1950s, acquired, documented, and legally exported from Egypt nearly 2 decades before the 1970 UNESCO Convention changed the rules of the game. The FBI reviewed the paperwork, consulted their cultural property division, and found no grounds to seize the piece. No crime. No case. The necklace came back to the table. 2 independent Egyptologists authenticated it through a formal review process. Both of them stopped short of confirming the Cleopatra attribution outright. Archaeology rarely gives you the clean, definitive answer you want, but here's what matters: neither of them ruled it out. In the world of ancient artifact attribution, that's as close to a confirmation as most pieces ever get. Rick made his offer for $100,000. The seller thanked him and walked. The necklace went to a private auction house shortly after. It sold for $1.4 million to an anonymous buyer whose name nobody in the industry is sharing. Whoever they are, they're sitting on something that 2 Egyptologists couldn't debunk and $1 million appraisal couldn't fully contain. Rick has never publicly said whether he regrets not going higher. Never said whether $400,000 felt like the right number or just the safe one. He doesn't need to say it. That moment, hands flat on the counter, eyes wide, breathing slow, while Dr. Hochberg's number hung in the air. That moment said everything a person needs to know about what Rick Harrison felt in that room. This became one of the most replayed clips in Pawn Stars history. And honestly, it's not hard to understand why. And if you think $1 million and an FBI call was wild, wait until you see what a World War II soldier's personal journal did to Rick Harrison. That video is coming next, and the number will floor you.